In this video, we are going to be looking at some repeated topics in accounting exams, basically Waec and then UTME JAM. The reason why it is very important to bring this to students is because we don't want students to be in complete ignorance of the areas of concentration. You know, every exam has what we call a flashpoint, the focus or the emphasis of such an exam. So it will be an advantage to any students that is privileged to look at this video to have an understanding of where he or she need to focus his or her preparation for exam, especially in Waec. Now, for accounting is not like other subjects where you just wake up in the morning and then you just look at it before you go to the examination hall. Accounting requires consistent practice. And you can actually practice amiss. What I mean is you can practice out of the context of what you are expected to practice awaiting exams. And that's what makes students feel accounting very well. Some person will tell you accounting is difficult. That's because your preparation is not, it's not centered on the focus of Waec. So in this video, I'm going to be pointing out few topics that I want to assure you that Waec cannot set their exams without at least one or two questions on them. Number one, if you want to write Waec, make sure you have an understanding of what we call the double entry principle. You see, the double entry principle of accounting is the foundation of accounting. What I mean is I'm going to be writing it on the board. I say the first one is what we call the double entry bookkeeping. Double entry bookkeeping. Double entry bookkeeping is as important as accounting itself because every other transactions that will be carried out subsequently, either in bookkeeping or in account, is centered on the double entry principle, bookkeeping. So Waec you can't write any exam in Waec without a good knowledge of double entry principle. And you know that this principle states that for every debit entry, there must be a corresponding credit entry and vice versa. So the transactions will always come in such a way that the double entry principles will be applied to it. We believe that for every time you are ready to give out something, somebody must be on the other side to receive. So we debit whoever receives and then we credit whoever gives. So if you are preparing for Waec, you must make out time to understand this principle. Number two is what we call the source document. Source document. Or with what we call subsidiary books. Just put it subsidiary books. Subsidiary books and source document. Subsidiary books are books of original entry. They are books where transactions are recorded before they are posted to the ledger. For now, we have basically 5 subsidiary books. We have the sales day book, what we call the sales journals. We have the purchase day book, what we call the purchase journals. We have the return invoice day book, what we call sales returns journals, and we have the return outwards day book, which we also call purchase journal, and then we have the cash book. Now, these are 5 fundamental subsidiary books. If these books are not carefully studied, then you will have a lot of challenges when you are preparing for Waec, because Waec we always want to find out the student's level of intelligence or student's efficiency on the subsidiary books. Then the source document. Source documents are what we call objective evidence or documentary evidence that shows the reality or the authenticity of a transaction. Transaction took place between two persons. What is the proof? So the proof of transaction is very, very important. Some textbook, we call it business document. They are basically your invoice. They are basically your invoice, your invoice, your receipts, your debit notes, credit notes, and so on and so forth. So you must understand that each of these subsidiary books comes with a source document. And then the third one is what we call balancing of the ledger. Balancing of the ledger. The balancing of the ledger is an extension of the ledger as a topic. It's one thing to understand the ledger, it's another thing to be able to balance up a ledger. Sometimes students, they can apply the principle of double entry, but when it comes to the area of balancing the ledger, is always very, very difficult. So at this level, it is very, very important for students to take time to understand how to balance a ledger account. What do I mean by balancing a ledger account? When you have something like this, let's assume I have sales ledger. If I have a sales ledger, and then let me assume I have maybe cash here. Let me assume I have cash 10,000, and then this is cash 10,000. Let me assume I have return invoice. This is cash. Okay, if I want to balance this ledger account, how do I balance this? You know that this is what we call balancing of the ledger account. Or better still, let me use a very practical account. Let's leave sales. Let's do a very practical account. Let's use cash book. I have a cash book here. Okay, let's go. This is your credit side. This is your debit side. We are using Nigerian currency. Now, in cash book, we credit what goes out and then we debit what comes in. Let's assume we have purchase here. Let's assume it's 10,000. We have salaries here. Let's assume it's 5,000. And then on the debit side, let's assume we have receipts. Let's assume loan, receive loan of 20,000, and then we have a sales of 10,000. Now, this is what a ledger looks like. How do we now balance this? First of all, this is, if you add the credit side, it will give you 15,000. You add the debit side, it will give you 10,000. So how do we balance this? Now, the balancing of this account is simply what I need to do to understand the amount of money that I will be left with at the end of the operation. So if I'm doing that, here plus here is 15. The credit side is 15,000, while the debit side is what? 30,000. So you ask yourself, which side of this account is higher? You see that the debit side of the account is higher than the credit side. So what you do is the higher side of this account will be in the total column. So you have 30,000 here and you have 30,000 here. So the difference between the two will now give you your balance carried down, which is what? 15,000. So 15,000 is what will be added to this 15,000 to give you 30. And then you come down over here, your balance brought down is what? 15,000. That is what is called balancing of the ledger account. You cannot write Waec without attending to questions like this. And then the next one that students will also need to understand is what we call bank reconciliation statement. Bank reconciliation statement is a statement that is prepared to reconcile the differences or the discrepancies between the cash book and the bank statement. If you can understand the technicalities involved in balancing the ledger, in reconciling the cash book and the bank statement, then you are good to go. Bank reconciliation statement. So under this bank reconciliation statement, students should understand the reasons why the cash book may not agree with the bank statement. And then some of them, like the unpresented check, we have the uncredited check, credit transfer, and then we have standing order, and so on and so forth. Then the next one is what we call the trading profit or loss account. Trading profit or loss account is an account that is prepared to determine gross profit or loss, and then you also use it to determine what we call net profit or loss. The examiner will want to find out your strength on how to be able to determine gross profit and or loss, or net profit or loss. And then one very important account that students also need to master very well is what we call the control account. Control account is basically an account that is prepared to keep track of debtors and creditors. The reason why it is important to understand control account is because if you are preparing incomplete record, if you have a questions on incomplete record, you need control account to understand it. If you are preparing account for NGOs, what we call non-profit making organization, you are preparing their income and expenditure, you also need control account to be able to determine certain missing figures. So control account is very, very paramount. And when you are doing control account, there is a rule or there are principles that you must master. One, understand that if it is debtors control account, whatever will increase what your debtors are owing you will be what? Debited. And whatever will decrease what they are owing you will be credited. But if it is creditors control account, whatever will increase what you are owing your creditors will be credited, and whatever will decrease what you are owing your suppliers will be what? Debited. So please don't forget, control account is very, very important. Control account will help you to solve incomplete record, and it also help you to solve account for NGOs. And then another very important topic that students must study very well is what I call the cash book. The cash book is basically in types. We have the 1-column cash book, 2-column cash book, 3-column cash book, and petty cash book. Petty cash book, most times they may not ask you to prepare the account, but they may give you in the objectives. They can give you lists of transactions and then give you what we call the float, and they may ask you to determine what you can determine, probably what's called reimbursement. They will ask you to determine the reimbursement. How much should the main cashier reimburse to the petty cashier? You see? So it's very, very paramount. And then mostly the public sector accounting is not always frequent. Sometimes it can come maybe once in 2 years. Some other times it can come once in 3 years. You know, that one doesn't come frequently. Public sector accounting. And then partnership account. Partnership account is an account that it doesn't appear frequently too. But so there's something about partnership account. Partnership account, because of the lengthy nature of the account, it appears in bits. Like this year, they can decide that this year they are going to concentrate on appropriation account. If they want to concentrate on appropriation account, they may just ask you to prepare appropriation account and then determine the profit sharing, the profit that is accruable to a particular partner, and then you will be asked to prepare current account. That's just all for partnership. Some other time, they may want you to just prepare only the current account. Anytime you're asked to prepare only the current, these ones come basically in theory. It comes basically in the objective. But if there is a time when they will want you to prepare the partnership trading profit or loss account, they may not expect you to prepare the current account because it's not going to be, the time allocated is not going to be enough. Remember that the whole exam is just for 3 hours. The objective is 1 hour, while the theory is 2 hours. So it will not be enough. And then the OBJ, the objective is 50 questions to answer within 1 hour, while the theory is divided into section A and B. Section A is 4 questions to answer 2, while section B is 5 questions to answer 3. And each of these questions goes with 15 marks. So when you are given this kind of, Waec is going to carefully select questions that can be solved within this period. So if you want to study for Waec, basically you go for, first of all, start with the double entry principle. Master the double entry bookkeeping. If you can master it, you are already 10% ready. And then after you have mastered that, go for the subsidiary books and source documents. After that, look at the balancing of a ledger, and then you look at your bank reconciliation, and you look at your profit, your trading profit or loss account. Then you look at control account. Control account, we create a background or the foundation for incomplete record and account for non-profit making organization. And then you now look at cash book. Cash book is basically 1 column cash book, 2 column cash book, 3 column cash book, and then petty cash book. And then another very important topic apart from partnership is company account. Company account is an account that is basically prepared to determine the profit realized by a company. You know, they may want you to prepare appropriation account for a company and a balance sheet. The appropriation account of a company is somehow very, very technical. It's not like the appropriation account of partnership. Appropriation account of a company comes with, you know, the company tax, corporate tax. You see it on the debit side of the account. You see the interim dividends. You see the proposed dividends. You also see what we call goodwill written off. And then you see general reserve and revenue reserve. These are the transactions that you will possibly see in the company appropriation account. Then on the credit side, you can see the profit of last year that is brought into this year, and then you see the profit realized. Now a question will come in your mind when you are preparing. Why do we have to separate this set of expenses from the expenses that we have in the normal company trading profit or loss account? Beautiful question. The answer is simple. Why? The reason is because there are expenses that must be deducted before you can realize your profit, and there are expenses that must be deducted once you have realized your profit. Some expenses must be paid based on profit, while some must be paid before you realize your profit. For instance, the corporate income tax. Nobody will charge you tax until you realize profit. That tax is charged on profit. So until you realize your profit, you can calculate tax. Then interim dividend. Nobody share dividends, or nobody pay dividends without realizing profits. So these are the differences between the normal expenses that you see in your company trading profit or loss account and the appropriation account. And then another one that I need to mention is what I call departmental account. Students should understand the difference between departmental account and branch account. Very important. They may ask you to differentiate in the theory. They may ask you to differentiate between departmental account and branch account. Departmental account is simply prepared to determine the profit realized by all the departments. While branch account is prepared to understand or to determine the profit realized by a branch. Don't forget to understand or to remember that departmental account is prepared in a particular geographical location. Like for instance, you may have DISCALMER Nigeria Limited. DISCALMER Nigeria Limited may want to deal on manufacturing of goods. Now, as they are manufacturing goods, they may have a department that is centered on bread. They may have a department that is centered on plastic. They may have a department that is centered on different, categories of items. Now, these departments have their various operations, but the account that is going to prepare will house all these departments in a single account. But in a branch account, like bank as an instance, you see, bank have different branches. If you are using First Bank as an instance, you see First Bank, you can see even in a particular state, you can see up to 20 branches of a particular bank. You go to the next state, the same thing. But the head office may be located probably in Lagos. So the account that will be prepared will be centered on the activities at a particular branch. So students should understand the difference between these two. And then when you are preparing the account you are going to prepare for departmental account is different from the account prepared for branch account. I think these are the few topics that I really know that you cannot prepare effectively for Waec or Waec related exams, and you may not, if you don't understand, you can do well. If you really want to master or you want to do exceptionally well, do well to look at these topics and master them. If you have questions, you have questions to ask, look for somebody that can help you understand these questions. I believe that if you are able to master these various topics, I believe that your A is very, very sure.